Welcome, everybody. I want to say good morning, but good morning, good afternoon, but it could be morning where you are or evening. And we've got people watching from all over the world. We've been hearing some people reporting in from various parts of the world. So we welcome everybody. And today's topic is going to be about living from the heart and about also our connection between to us and our hearts to spirit, and talking about reaching the spirit realm and all sorts of things like that. So I just want to say that this topic I cover in a 2 full day workshop, and it goes all sorts of different directions. So we have there's a lot of things that we talk about that I cannot do in a small 1.5 hour segment here. So I'm going to take a sliver of that workshop and present it here, and your questions will also help guide the direction that we go today. The first thing that I want to start with, though, is why I started teaching a workshop dealing with death. That's the first thing, because people have asked me before, why are you teaching that? And that's the exact reason why I'm teaching it, is because of people asking that question that way. And that is that we humans tend to make something different about death that animals and nature do not do. So we humans have separated ourselves out from our connection to a lot of things, but in particular to our connection to spirit. And animals don't have that same issue. So animals very much deal with death and dying and the process in a completely, really natural and very open way. And we humans can learn a lot from that. And as an animal communicator, since 1987, so however many years that is, it's been a long time. I've talked to tens of thousands of animals, literally. And I will make a statement right now that some of you, it may surprise some of you, but I've talked to other animal communicators who tell me the exact same thing. But in all the tens of thousands of animals I've talked to, I've never once talked to an animal that was afraid to die. And that, when I first started out, really, really stunned me. Like, it was a very stunning thing. I've talked to animals who have died many different ways, tragically, naturally, all sorts of different ways. And I've never had an animal that I talked to that was afraid to die. It does not mean that they're not afraid of how they could die or what could happen to them. They're 2 separate issues, 2 separate topics. And I think that that's really important. The second thing is that every consultation that I've ever done with animals, and I can do consultations with animals that are in spirit, just like I can if they're sitting in front of me, or if I'm talking to somebody on the phone and doing a consultation. Telepathy doesn't know time or space. We talked about this in the first lecture. And so we're not inhibited by the physical proximity. Telepathy is a heart connection, one heart to another. It's an energy, a very real energy connection. And when we leave our physical bodies, our energy is still very much alive. It's still very much there. So when we lose somebody that we love, when somebody that we love, whether it's animal or human, whenever they die, it's imperative to understand that that connection is still very much alive. The heart connection surpasses the physical body. So there's still very much a connection. And when I started doing consultations with people early on people with their animals, early on in my career, the number one thing that animals would say to me when I talked to them in spirit was they wanted their people to know that they still feel them. And unanimously, that was like the first message that they would give me when I would connect with them. And as I got doing this, when I first started as a professional animal communicator, I was in my 20s. I didn't really believe in a lot of things. I didn't. I luckily was fairly enough open-minded that I learned about all of these things as I was going. But I didn't walk into this just thinking, oh, well, I can talk to people in spirit or animals in spirit. I learned this as I was going because it just naturally happened. And when animals started sharing their experiences of what happened when they crossed over, it opened up my world in amazing ways. And since then, I've had so many of these, including here at Spring Farm, where we specialize in elder and hospice care. So we have animals that die here. I'm not going to say on a daily basis, but on a regular basis. Sadly, that's the nature of our business. So I've sat with, countless animals as they have passed. I've also been with people on the phone with animals that have passed and gone through that process with them. So I have lots of experience, and that's where I teach this workshop from. In addition, I'm not going to get much into this because we had to really pick what we could do in an hour and a half. But in addition, in the workshop, I talk a lot about other work that I have done since I was a kid, actually. And on the ethereal plane, I want to explain it that way, but helping people and animals cross over. So I have a lot of experience with that whole process. And I bring all of those stories and experiences to teaching this in the workshop. The other thing, though, that I want to do is the thing is we don't like to admit as humans, but everybody is going to go through this. Whether you lose somebody or it's your own death, everybody's going to be dealing with this. Death is a fact of life, but humans, we tend to culturally, and different cultures handle death differently, for sure. But we tend to make it an end to something. And that is not how nature looks at it. It's not how animals look at it. Death is not an ending to them. It's like walking into the next room. They know they still go on. They know that there's something else. So with the human experience is very unique in that we get hung up in concepts and thoughts and ideas that are sometimes very negative and very scary for people. They bring up a lot of fear for people. So when we're kids, people will tell us, and they help shape us depending on different things and how you were raised, and whether it can be whatever different by religion or whatever, but culturally different. But you'll be given a view of death, like here's what happens, and in some cases with humans, if you don't do this just right, you're going to go to one place, and if you live really good, you're going to go to another place. And animals do not have that. They don't have that at all. So they don't have mother dogs don't tell their litter of puppies, you got to behave yourself, because if you don't, you're going to go someplace you really don't like. And they don't have this notion of that. They're also not they don't have an overlay of fear on them for that reason. So it's a really unique experience to look at death through nature, through animals, from an angle of a being that's not afraid. And they bring a very unique thing. So what can we do? What can we do when we have an animal that's dying? Because this is a question I'm asked all the time. What can we do to help them or to make it easier for them? And the answer to that is that simply being present with them is actually the greatest gift you can give anybody, human or animal, as they're dying. And they will thrive on that. They will pick up that heart connection, and it allows them to do what it is that they need to do and what they need to pass. And I have seen animals, I've seen humans and animals find their purpose in life and why they're here, literally in their final moments. I've seen it, I've experienced it, I felt it. And all of us are here. All of us come into this life to do something, to work on something for ourselves. And we go through all of these experiences in life. And as we get to our, whatever our end of life is, we go through a lot of times a review if there's time. I mean, sometimes death is instantaneous or through an accident or whatever. But even with animals, they go through that same process of looking their life over. What did I do? What am I going to do? And they'll weigh all of these things. But the greatest thing you can do is simply be there with them. And Becca, are people putting questions in yet?
Not yet. I just popped a reminder in there that if anyone has questions to put
Okay.
them in the chat. I'm sure we'll get them, but
Yeah, I'm sure we
not
will
not
too.
yet.
I just want to make sure that I get to questions that people, because like I said, this is a topic that is so vast. I want to make sure that we go the direction that's going to be most helpful in this time period. One of the things that people ask me is if there's any difference for animals, for example, in a euthanasia or a natural death. That's a really common question. And my experience is that there's not necessarily a difference. The same process still happens. I had somebody once say to me that, and actually this was a veterinarian that said this to me, that they, when it comes to their own animals, when they know that they're dying, when they know their animal's dying, they will euthanize them so that the animal doesn't have to go through the death process. So I just want to say, there's always a death process. It just looks different on our end, but the animal still goes through a process of leaving their body, crossing into spirit, and going through those experiences. So I have not found that there's any difference with that. And euthanasia can be the greatest gift that we can give them. So, and also some of them, like when we have a hospice situation here, if the animal's really comfortable and fine, and we can keep them comfortable, if they tell us that's what they want to do is to go through a natural death, we allow them to do that as well. So, I think it's important to know that when we pass, and this has been my experience with the animals as well, that there's always somebody there to meet them. There are loved ones there to meet them, and that's true with animals and also with humans. The first horse death that we had here on the farm was really interesting for me. And her name was Gigi, and Gigi was 40 years old. And she, when she died, she ended up having organ failure, but it showed up as a colic at the end. And we had our vet come and determined it was time to let her go. She wasn't going to recover from this. So it was the first euthanasia that I was present for in a horse. And horses are, for those of you who have horses on here who have been through this, you know it is a huge death because it's such a big animal, and it's very big to go through this. But Gigi, as she was standing there, and we were preparing, Gigi looked at me and she said, "Do you want to experience this with me?" And again, I'm kind of jumping to a story here that's ahead of explaining how I can do that. But anyway, I was able to telepathically, she wanted me to show me what it was that she experienced. So she was actually laying down. The vet gave her the injection. And all of a sudden, her legs started just kicking and moving. And I thought maybe that's what happens. But I've never seen this happen. This was the only time it happened in all the euthanasias I've done since then. which is a lot. Her legs started moving, and all of a sudden somebody there said, that's a perfect gallop. Like, she's galloping. So I said, Gigi, where are you? She goes, come on, we're gonna go. Come on, I'm gonna go. And so she's running. She shows me she's running through this field, and way ahead on the field is this split rail fence. And I see a person, a human, up on that split rail fence with a rope in her hand. It was a woman, and I recognized the woman immediately because in this case, Gigi, we knew who Gigi's owner had been. She was owned by one person for 37 years until that person actually died. And that's how Gigi ended up with us. And we knew the person. So her name was Carol. And Carol was up on this fence, and she was waving her arms, to me. And Gigi was heading there like at a dead gallop. And when I realized what was happening, I said, Gigi, leave your body behind. You got to leave your body behind. And she goes, oh, sorry. And then all of a sudden, the feet just went still. The galloping stopped. And she continued galloping across the field, and she got to the fence. And Carol was so excited to see her. And Carol slipped a rope over her neck, jumped on Gigi's back, and the two of them went galloping off together. And that was how Gigi left this physical plane. To have seen it, felt it, experienced that with her was such an amazing gift. And it really set the course for me in how we deal with things here. I always ask the animals if they want to share when they're passing, so that I've done that a lot. But always they're met by somebody, whether it's another animal, a human friend, but there's always somebody there.
We have some good questions now,
Okay,
Dawn.
great.
Could you talk a little bit more about the difference between how an animal experiences a euthanasia death versus a natural death? Because I think some people, when they make that decision, there's a lot of doubting. Did I make the right decision? I feel bad. Can you just talk a little bit about how they experience both of them?
Yes. So, because this is important, I just want to say that even after doing, I've lost count. It's hundreds, if not thousands. I don't know how many it's been over. I mean, we've been doing this almost 40 years here. So it's a lot of animals that have come through here that I've personally had to, that decision here in our organization comes to me. I mean, I'm the final say on that here. And there are days, I'm just going to be honest, there are days that responsibility feels like a boulder sitting on my shoulder or on my head, especially when there are animals that either I'm really attached to or we're all attached to all the animals here. So it's impossible to say. They're never at arm's length. They're always right here with us. But when it's a very volatile one emotionally for staff or for me personally, it's harder. But I will say that making a euthanasia decision is the hardest decision we ever have to make. And it's, I will tell you that part of the human process seems to be, regardless how sure you are that it's time. And I have ones I know for sure it's time. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. But I always afterwards come back to this place where I go, did I just do the right thing? And I think there's a natural process that happens. So people in workshops tell me this all the time that, now I'm worried if it was the right thing. That's part of our grief process. And you need to recognize it as that, because we second guess what we actually knew was right. The other thing is when you're making an animal a euthanasia decision, I like to say with an animal instead of for an animal, because it's something you're actually doing together. And so the number one question as an animal communicator, the number one call I received was, is my animal ready to go? In every single case where a person asked me that, my response was never a surprise to that person. They knew. And so as I started seeing that over the years too, it encouraged me to do this workshop, because we need to trust that connection we have with them. And we need to trust that we know when it's time. So let me give you an example. Sometimes we have animals that are really elderly who are failing, and we will have relatives, friends say to us, why don't you euthanize that cat, or why don't you euthanize the dog? You're just holding on for yourself. And they start to do this. They mean well. There are people in your life that mean well because they see that you're in pain, and they think, just get it over with and just euthanize them, and then you'll move on. But there's a process a lot of the times that these animals are going through with you, and sometimes they are holding on because they know you are not ready yet. And I've seen lots of animals do that. They'll wait until you're ready. So this is something, though, that you're doing together. You're not doing something bad to them by procrastinating on it or whatever. You're waiting for when that is clear to you and clear in your heart that it's time. And what I have found is when people understand that they have that connection and that you can trust that connection, that decision, all of a sudden, it's never easy, but it's all of a sudden certain. Like, you just know today's the day, or I need to make that phone call today. And even though later you're going to second guess it and do all those things, it's human nature to do that. You need to go back and look and say, it was really clear at the time. And it is. I've only had one animal in all the, I'm telling you, it's tens of thousands of animals, but I've only had one animal that when I did a consultation, that animal was angry about, it was going to be euthanized, and the animal was angry about it. Only one. And the person who was calling me was a horse. And the person that was calling me was the horse's trainer, not the horse's owner. And so this person had no say over the decision at all, and was calling to make sure that the horse was okay. It was a perfectly healthy horse, and but they were breeding her, and the babies were not coming out the color that they wanted. And they didn't want to sell the horse because she was producing babies that were very high quality, and they would have ended up showing against these horses in the show ring. But they really wanted babies of a certain color. So because of this, they were actually euthanizing her. And that horse was extremely angry about it. I don't blame her, So it was trying to be there for her. And her question to me was, explain to me how this makes sense. And I can't explain to her why that makes sense. But I could try to help her for what she needed to speak and to communicate that how upsetting that was, and she would have liked to have lived longer. I don't know what the outcome of that. The person I was talking to on the phone, well, I do know that the mare was eventually euthanized, but the person on the phone, I believe, quit that place after that because they just couldn't be a part of that. So, but the job then was to try to prepare this horse for that, for what was coming 2 days later, regardless of what she wanted. And that's a tough position to be in. So for her, for me, that was just a tough situation. Most of the calls I got were not like that. So that was the only animal that I had that was angry about what was going to happen. The rest of them were all, can you help my person? I'm going to tell a story. There was one time that I was talking to two people on a phone call. It was a conference call. They were in separate places. It was a husband and wife. They were in separate places. And their dog was actually at an emergency clinic. So the dog was in a third place. So this was this major conference call. Obviously, I didn't have the dog on the phone. So the dog had some sort of medical issue that had to go in for surgery. And there was some chance, based on what they were finding during the surgery, that the dog was going to be found to have a terminal illness. And so the gist of the phone call was to figure out how much they wanted to do with the dog. If they were going to start chemo, And these were medical professionals, both husband and wife were medical professionals, understood exactly all the ramifications of what was going on. But they really wanted to know the dog's perspective of how much she wanted to go through. So I'm in the, it was a great consultation. I've got the dog, I've got the, husband and wife on the phone, and we're having this great conversation when suddenly the dog says to me, something's happening. Something's happening. And I said, okay, like what's happening? And this dog, as it turns out, was on the table having surgery at that time. I didn't know that at that moment. I'm not sure even if the owners knew that at that moment. They knew she was going in for surgery, but I don't know if they actually knew she was in surgery when they were talking to me. And the dog suddenly says to me, I'm not going to survive this. I can't do this. So she says to me, this opportunity just appeared where I can leave my body, and I need you to let them know how much I love them and that I'm sorry it's unexpected, but it's the best way. And I'm so happy. Like this whole opportunity. And I saw her filled with just this golden light around her. And she said, I can leave right now. I said, like right now? Like right now. And she was like right now. And I need you to tell them something for me. And so just as she gave me the message, and just, it was a long, very personal message for them. And as long as I was just going to start I'm thinking to myself, how do I broach this? How do I break this to them? And what do I say? When the dog was like, I'll tell you exactly how to say it. And so she started giving me what to say, when all of a sudden a pager went off on one of the, it was on the husband's phone. And he says to his wife, we got to hang up. Her heart just stopped on the table. And I said, okay, you guys can go, but I have to tell you something really important. And so I gave the message to them from their dog. And they called me back a couple of hours later and said that the vet that was working on the dog had tried CPR. They tried to bring the dog back. And she didn't, she left. But they got to be with her. They got there very quickly, and they got to be with her and hold her and she, she was gone. And, but because of the message that she had given them, they knew exactly what to tell them on the phone, because as they were driving there, they had restarted her heart once. And as they were driving there, they told the vet, if she codes again, if she stops again, do not restart her heart. And they got there, she was unconscious because she was still under anesthesia, but they got to hold her. And just as they walked in, her heart stopped and she left. But they knew it was the right thing based on this conversation. I don't usually have that happen. That was a once in a lifetime kind of situation. But these are the kinds of things that I've, been through over and over again with animals and in passing. So I'll go to the next question, Becca.
So this is a big one, but when we have an animal that does pass away, how do we connect with them after they're not here physically?
Okay. So when your animal passes, I will tell you that they don't have a problem reaching you. And I will tell you that it's our problem as a human. It's not really a problem, but here's what happens. When we go through grief, which everybody does, and it's a totally natural thing, myself included, doesn't matter how long I've been communicating with animals or how many animals I've communicated with. When I lose one that, of my own, it's extremely difficult. I swear I can't hear them, and I go through all the same things that everybody else does. When we are in our grief and our sadness, and we're feeling that emptiness, we are actually the most disconnected from them. And what I take clients through when I was doing consultations, and what I tell people at workshops, and what I do for myself, is I allow myself up to grieve. That's a normal process. You're still going to do that. But I then purposely try to remember something about that animal, whether it's a memory of an exact thing that happened or something that happened every day, a mannerism, something that always made me laugh. Could just be how they run into the room to greet you when you come home, or They're snoring in the way they slept, whatever it is, something that just makes you fill with joy and love. That is when you're most connected to them. And they feel that in that moment. And they will send you something. So, what I will tell you is whether it's human or animal, it doesn't matter. If you are doing something, you could be in the shower, you could be pumping gas. I get a lot of things when I'm pumping gas because it's a mindless activity. I'm watching the many numbers get higher and higher, and all of a sudden I'll get something. I get a ton of information. I get tons of things in the shower because I'm not trying. And it's a moment of just being open. When you suddenly are doing something, you could be reading a book, and suddenly you're flooded with the memory of one of your loved ones that has passed. That is because they are connecting with you. And it happens to you all the time. You get messages, you get love from your loved ones all the time from spirit, but we pass over it, we overlook it. We tend to second guess it, or we say, oh, that was just, I was just thinking of them or whatever. But you get communications from them all the time because they care what happens to you after they're gone, and they do connect with you. And sometimes you physically can feel them join you. I know many of you on here have had that experience where suddenly you'll feel your cat who has passed jump in your bed with you, or your dog or whatever, or you'll hear them in the house, or other animals in your house will respond as if they hear them. It happens all the time around here at the farm. So they do come back and visit. They do send us love. They do remain in connection to us. And we're going to do an exercise here before this is up, and where I'm going to teach you an exercise on being present. We did it in the last Zoom call as well, and we'll do it in this one too. But just being present in your heart will allow that connection to happen. You don't have to do anything else. You just have to. The truth of the matter is, to reach them in spirit, all you need to do is feel the love you have for them, and it instantly goes to them. Instantly. You don't even have to have a special skill.
Dawn, when we have several animals and then one of them passes away, how do we help the animals that are still here with coping with the grief, especially if we're noticing that their behavior it's affecting their behavior?
Yeah. So this is a two-part question. So I'm going to say this because there are going to be others on here that are listening that have the opposite thing. I've had people call me and say, I don't get this. My two dogs have been together since they were, 12 years old. I mean, they're 12 years old. They've been together for 12 years. One of them dies and the other one doesn't seem to care. The other one now thinks, woohoo, I get all the treats, what is going on? And so I'll answer it from both angles. And I'm going to use a personal experience because this just happened for me. It was actually, I guess, 2 years ago now. We had, Margaret and I had 9 dogs at one point, and my lab was the youngest. So he was the puppy brought in to the pack. And one by one, through natural attrition, those dogs have died. And we were down to the last 2 young ones, which they weren't young anymore. They were 13 and 12. And so my yellow lab, Jesse, his best friend was a dog named Grace, who was 2 years older than he was. And they were extremely close. And we still had 3 at that point. So there was Grace and Jesse, and then there was another one named Kaylee, who was just a little bit older. And Grace, so the first thing that happened is Kaylee died, like on a Tuesday. Let's say it was a Tuesday. She had a quick moving cancer that took her relatively quickly. And so she died, and I saw Jesse was like, wow. I mean, it really hit him that, it was just him and Grace now. But unexpectedly for us, and it was massive, Grace was born with a brain abnormality. She had a lesion in her brain, and she functioned a little bit abnormally, like her gait was different. but she otherwise lived a normal life. She could run and play and tackle, and she and Jesse were very physically active with one another. But all of a sudden, there was a change in her brain, and we even got an MRI, things like that, because we weren't sure what was going on. The contention was she probably had a stroke. The first one was minor, but the second one happened very unexpectedly, like strokes do. It happened very unexpectedly. One day to the day after Kaylee died, we lost Grace. And Jed left Jesse for the first time in his entire life as an only dog. And he was born into a litter of 9. He got adopted by me into a pack of 9, and he completely became so depressed. And we knew we needed to get him dog friends. We knew that, but we also knew he was getting older. He has hip dysplasia. He couldn't have a puppy that was going to be hauling around on him. We wanted to make the right decision. We were grieving. To lose 2 dogs in a week, 2/3 of our dog population that was left was a lot for us. We didn't feel like we could just go out and adopt another dog. We have lots of dogs we can adopt from, but we didn't feel that was right. We couldn't really get a handle on what to do. So we were letting it coast for a little bit, and then we watched him. And he was really, really struggling. And we tried to be there for him. We did extra special things with him. He started coming over to the office with me. He had a lot of friends here in the office. He's a great yellow lab that everybody just adores. And everybody was, giving him lots of attention, and everything was happening. But it still wasn't the same for him. He just was so despondent. So we did end up eventually finding a dog. She was a 6-month-old, really shy dog that needed a lot of help. And she really clung to him for comfort. And to watch his healing happen, it didn't just happen overnight. To watch his healing happen took a couple of months of her just laying with him and playing with him and trying to do things. And then all of a sudden one day, Margaret and I were like, oh my God, look at the difference in him. Like he just suddenly was okay. He came out of that grief. And to watch that happen was extraordinary. I didn't really fully realize how bereaved he was until I saw him actually come through the other side of that. And they do come through the other side, and their needs are different. Each animal, like each person, grieves differently. The animals that don't act like they're grieving at all and act like they're excited that now they're number 1 dog, or they're number 1 cat, or they just moved up in the hierarchy. When I talk to them, because that happens in my own house too. When I've talked to them about it, they're like, yeah, but I know they're okay. So it's okay. I've had animals here leave other animals in charge. Like they'll leave instructions with we have communal cat rooms here, and sometimes one of the cats will die and they'll say to me, well, I left so and so in charge now, or I told this cat, they better jump in people's laps because people anticipate that I'm going to do that, and they'll pass the torch to somebody else and ask them to do those things. We've seen that happen so many times here. It's amazing. So how to help them is just really to be there with them and let them know you understand their heaviness. You understand their pain. You feel it too, and you understand it. That helps them, just so that they know they're being understood or being heard.
Thank you. I think another big topic is anticipatory grief, especially with pets, because a lot of people, they have pets that they know they might be nearing the end, but the quality of life is still okay. And so it's not time yet, but they know that's coming. And, the anticipatory grief can kind of steal your enjoyment of that last little time with your pet. So can you talk a little bit about how to deal with that?
Absolutely. Anticipatory grief is a very real thing, and it can become overwhelming because I I go through that as well. Again, talking about my dog Jesse, he is now in another week or two, he's going to be 14. And I'm watching him fail. He's having mobility issues. And it's going to come to a point where he's not going to be able to get up, and I'm not going to be able to carry him around. And I know that day is coming. So I can simply focus on that. I have to catch myself because I can simply focus on that, or focus on he's pretty darn happy right now. He's gimpy, he's limping around, but his tail is going constantly, and he'll look at me and just wag his tail. And it's like he's saying to me, okay, look, I'm okay today, right now. Let's not jump ahead. But we tend to do that. We absolutely tend to do that. And they pick up on that. Animals want to help us through that. They don't want to cause us pain and suffering and grief. They don't like it when that's happening. So, but just understand that that's a natural part of things, and try to focus on what's actually happening in the moment. It's easier said than done, I know.
When we're caught up in that and we're crying over their death and they're sitting over there like, I'm fine. Do they understand what we're going through, or do they think we're being a little silly?
It depends on the animal. They do understand what's happening. Um, I've had animals, when I do that, I've had animals do this like big, like there she goes again. The train left the station. But we've had others of our animals really try to do something funny, like to break it up, and to be for comic relief. They'll just start. I have one dog that'll get the zoomies and suddenly start, zinging around the house, and then I'll realize that's why they're doing that. They're picking up the energy and trying to help. But in general, that yeah, they understand. I mean, when you're emotional and doing that, they understand what's happening.
Mm. Can you talk a little bit? This is sort of similar, but not exactly the same thing. Having death anxiety or a fear of death, with people too. Can you talk a little bit about coping with that? Because I think some people, they are just very hyper aware of like, oh my God, what if I just had a stroke? Or what if, a lot of people are very anxious about death or maybe about their loved ones dying. Can you talk a little bit to that?
I can talk to that, but that's when and I know I'm not just trying to sell a workshop, I promise, but that's actually the point of my 2-day workshop. And it's not something that I can just tell like a story about to relieve that anxiety. We as a species have a lot of anxiety around our own deaths and death of our loved ones. I mean, we just carry a lot of anxiety about that. And so my experience with death and with people and animals crossing over is very different because I've been through so many of these, that I try to take people through a process of that over a 2-day period, because I respect the question, but I can't really answer that in a short snippet.
That's okay. It's a
Sorry
big
about that.
question. It's a big question. When we have an animal that passes away and then we end up getting a new animal, is our animal that is on the other side aware of this new animal? Do they communicate with each other? Do they have a relationship?
They can. Sometimes they do. Sometimes animals that come into your life after you lose one is actually sent by your animal friend that passed. That's a very common thing. They'll make sure you get connected, and they generally want you to be happy and move on. They want you to have a friend. They don't want you to be despondent and alone and just living your life missing them. A lot of people think they're betraying the animal that they lost by getting another one, or by getting, having somebody. But they want you to be happy and to move on. That's what they want for you. I mean, I can say that with great confidence across the board, that's, what they're looking for you to do.
When when we have an animal or even a person, but we're talking about animals that passes away, do you believe that we have some sort of pre-agreement beforehand with that animal to have that experience together for us to learn something, to learn a lesson?
I think a lot of times that is the case. We have agreements with other beings, whether they're human or animal, and we play out different roles in each other's lives for that. So yes, I mean, again, that's a longer answer, but I would have I have a lot of stories and a lot of examples of that for sure. Let me tell you one because I think this is important. There was a cat we took in here many years ago, and his name was Kitty. And Kitty had to come in here. We were asked to take him in because of a unique situation in which there was a child that had to have an infant that had to have a heart transplant, and they actually found a donor heart, and they were able to get the transplant in time to save the child. But surgery was a success, everything was great. Now it's time to come home, and the doctors asked if there were any pets in the home, and they had a dog and a cat. And the doctors told them they couldn't have any pets. And the family was devastated. There were other children in the family. They loved their cat and dog. And they did find a relative who could take the dog, but they couldn't find anybody to take the cat. So we ended up taking him when they absolutely got down to the last day, and it was holding up now whether the baby could come home or not. So we took in the cat. He was a great big cat, really friendly cat. And we named him True Heart because we wanted the story of why he lost his home, what he gave up for this baby to live, basically, was he gave up this home. And he was really, he did not want to leave that home. He loved it there. And so he comes here, and he was really touching a lot of people here. Kids loved him, just absolutely wonderful cat. And he had been here for, I don't know, 2-3 months, something like that. And one night I was doing a close down, and I went past his room, and I saw him laying in a weird position in the middle of the floor. And I thought, that looks weird. And I walked in, and he was completely unresponsive. He was comatose. I could pick him up and move him, and there was nothing. He wouldn't respond. He was still breathing. It was a Sunday night. We could not, there were no vet hospitals that we could get him to locally. And he was dying. And I just was so despondent about this cat dying. And I remember I picked him up and put him in my lap, and I was just sobbing. And I said to him, "Why are you leaving? Why are you leaving?" And he said, "My job here was done. I came to help the little boy. My job is done." And I said, "But you're such a great cat, and you could help somebody else. You know, we can find another person for you, and you can help somebody, and you can carry on your mission. You don't have to die to do that." And he said, "I don't know, you'd have to ask the angels." That was his answer to me. So I stayed with him for quite a while, and nothing changed. So I made sure he was comfortable on a blanket, and I was sure he was going to die. And I took him, I went into my room, I set my alarm for every hour, and I came out to check on him. And he was the same for two times. And then 4 o'clock in the morning, my alarm went off, and for some reason I shut it off and didn't get up. And all of a sudden woke up at 5 o'clock with this, like, terrified that I didn't check on him. I went running out to where he was. I went to the door of the room and looked in, and there was no cat. And I'm like, where did he go? And I look outside, I go in, I can't find him anywhere. And we have cat doors that go out into porches. And I heard the sound of a jingle bell outside, and I look out the window onto the porch, and there he is with another cat playing with this ball. And they're just chasing it around together. And I run out the door, and I said to him, "True Heart, what happened?" And he said, "Well, thank you for putting in a good word for me." He said, "I've been reassigned." And he said, I will have another mission. And I said, holy cow, okay. This kind of blew me away. He seemed totally healthy. We took him to the vet on that Monday. We took him to the vet. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. They said, he's totally healthy. Nothing's wrong with him. They did blood work. Everything was fine. Like, okay, we bring him back. We wait a couple of weeks, nothing happens. So all of a sudden, we were looking for a special home for him. All of a sudden, Bonnie calls me on the phone one day and she said, I need you to come from your office out here to where the cat rooms are. She said, there's a little boy that just came in who has fallen absolutely in love with True Heart. And she said, I think he may have found his next mission. She said, you got to come over here. So I come over. And the story on this kid is that he was born with some issue with his brain and he was having seizure disorders. And because he was having such violent seizures, he couldn't go to school. He wasn't allowed to go to public school. But this was a condition he'd eventually grow out of. So his mother wanted him to have, he was being homeschooled at that point. So his mother wanted him to have a friend, and somebody had suggested that a cat might be really good. So they adopted him. We just knew this was it. This was the right place. And so we sent him off with this little boy. So every year at Christmas time, they would send us a picture of the boy and the cat with Santa Claus every year. And then one year, all of a sudden, no photo arrives. And we don't get any letters or anything. So we were afraid to ask. So we ended up contacting the people. And the woman says to me, the weirdest thing happened. She said, one night I went to go to bed and suddenly True Heart was just curled up in a ball on a bed, completely unresponsive. She said he was still breathing, but he was totally unresponsive. So she said, I rushed him to the vet. She said, I've been afraid to call and tell you this because I'm afraid we did something wrong. She said, I rushed him to the emergency vet and he passed away, but they couldn't find anything wrong with him. They didn't know what caused it. And she said, my son, he was everything to my son. And she said, he started school the week before. You know, as soon as I heard that, mission was over. His mission was over. So these animals will come in frequently like that to give us amazing gifts. A lot of you here on this call have experienced that, where an animal's come into your life and just completely changed something for you or changed you. And they bring in these enormous gifts. Yeah.
We have a few questions about reincarnation, and is it possible for animals to come back into our lives in the body of a different animal?
So my experience, I can only answer this from my experience. My experience is yes, they can. But I always put this caveat out there. Don't worry, if you don't believe in reincarnation, it's fine. You know, not everybody does, and that's fine. It's totally fine. Whether you believe in it or not, I had somebody ask one of our horses here if animals believe in reincarnation, and the horse's response was, that's really funny that you would ask that. Do humans believe in breathing? And she said, it's not anything to believe in or not believe in, we just do it. So it was like what's the big deal? You know? So, and that usually is the response I get from animals on the topic of reincarnation. But yes, we have experienced that here. We've experienced animals coming back. We knew it would. And can I scientifically prove that? Obviously not. But when you experience it and you just know that it's somebody you've known before, and you usually know who it is, trust that. I always tell people, just trust your heart on that.
Yeah, someone was referencing a story in one of you and Bonnie's books about a four-legged animal coming back as maybe a rooster that was having trouble with extra legs. I don't know if that story rings a bell.
No, I have, here's my short, this is my short reincarnation story, okay? I was teaching a workshop in Idaho, and I was at this person's house, and a visitor had come to the house during the workshop, and she asked for a consultation. So she was all I knew was that she had an animal that she lost, that she was really grief-stricken about, and they wondered if I would do a consultation for her as a gift. The hostess of the workshop wondered if I would do that. So I did. And I did the workshop. I did it in front of the workshop because that was part of the workshop at the time, was to do live consultations so people could see what it was about and see how animals, responded to things or whatever. So anyway, so she starts telling me about this pet, and the pet was a rooster, and I can't remember the rooster's name right now, but she starts telling me about the rooster. It had a name and everything, and she said, I said, do you know what happened to the rooster? She said, I don't know. He just disappeared. And all of a sudden, the rooster comes in to me with this message, and I can repeat this whole consultation verbatim because it's so memorable. So just give me 1 second because I have to get into my rooster mode because it was very specific. So I said to him, what happened? What do you want your person to know? And he says this, just like this. Lady, there I was, walking through the barnyard, minding my own business. It was a sunny day when suddenly, bam, I'm in an egg again. That was it. That was the message. And at first I thought, I started laughing, and people sitting there probably thought I was, deranged or whatever. I was sitting there laughing, and this poor woman is sobbing about losing her rooster. And so I repeat the message, and she stops crying, and she looked at me, and she starts laughing hysterically, and she said, that is so him. That is so him. That was just how he would have talked. And so that was the fastest reincarnation story I have. Anyway,
That's
spoken
good.
in
Thank
true
you.
rooster form.
Maybe last question on this topic, and then we can move on. If you have an animal, they pass away, maybe they're reincarnated into another animal across the country in someone else's family, can you still connect to them the same way, even though they're this different animal now?
Okay, so this is a really common question. So I have a demonstration that I give this with, so I have to use this demonstration. So I want you to picture your hand, okay? So your spirit, that you're in this body, but your spirit is way bigger than actually what fits in your body. So if you would picture this, let's just say you had a cat named Sparky, okay? And I want you to picture Sparky is the Sparky soul is the palm of your hand. And that's his soul energy. Now, Sparky had a lifetime with you where he was right there in this thumb was Sparky. Some of his soul energy went into that cat form and was in there. And that whole lifetime had memories and experiences with you and other animals maybe, and all the relationships that he had. And all the memories and the experience of that lifetime are very unique to Sparky, and they're very unique in that fingerprint that's from that finger. Now Sparky dies, he comes back, his energy comes back into his major soul thing in the palm of the hand. Now Sparky comes in again as a different animal. Let's just say he chooses to be a cat again, and now he's a cat, he's a female cat named Delilah. And he's got this life, or she has this lifetime now as Delilah, and she has all these memories. She's somewhere else off in another part of the country even, and she's with different people, and she has all these things. Now, when you think of your cat, Sparky, and you're trying to send energy to him, it goes to that soul energy, to that memory as Sparky. Each of these lifetimes are still part of the whole, and you still will get all of those unique memories and everything. That's the closest I can come to explaining that. So you definitely will still access, they could be off doing something else, but you will still access that being who was your cat with that name. Does that
That's
make
very
sense?
helpful. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. We've gotten to all the questions we've gotten so far. I don't know if you wanted to do that exercise.
Yes, I do. So that's a perfect time. Thank you. So what I'm going to have everybody do this, we're not going to do, it's not going to be like a meditation. You can actually do this with your eyes open, but I'm going to ask you to close your eyes just so that you cut down on your the disruptions around you, and just close your eyes. Take a nice deep breath and slowly let it out. And take another deep breath and slowly let it out. And then again, another deep breath. And slowly let it out. And I want you to continue breathing slightly deeper and slower than usual, than normal. But I want you to picture and imagine that your breath is coming in and out of your heart, that you're breathing from your heart in and out. And as you're breathing in and out of your heart, I want you to think of an animal that's very meaningful to you. It can be an animal that's alive with you now. It can be an animal in spirit. It can even be a human, but somebody that you feel unconditional love for and from, that just makes you light up inside, makes your heart feel full. And I want you to continue breathing from that space in your heart. Feel your love for that animal. Just be in this space together. Notice how your heart feels, how your body feels. And I want you to send love and gratitude to that animal for being with you and for loving you. And continue breathing in and out of your heart through that love. And from this space, just ask that animal if it wants to tell you anything. Take a nice deep breath in and slowly let it out. And then open your eyes. Bring your awareness back to our group. Notice if you feel different right now in your body than you felt before. This is how easy it is to just be present. Whether we're sitting with somebody or if we're worried about somebody who's far away from us. When you can breathe in and out of your heart like this and think of them with love and gratitude, it drops you into that heart space, and that's a moment of being present. And it is the greatest gift you can give to a human or animal that's dying when you're with them, to be in that space like that. It just gives them the opportunity to do what they need to do, to be, and to be with you. So I hope some of you were able to feel that difference. I can feel it through the through the energy here. So
Thank you, Dawn. That was great. Yeah, everybody feels like they just went
yeah, yeah, you just feel it settle in. It's a good way to go on with your afternoon.
So I don't know, Dawn, we technically have till 3:30. I don't know if we want to chat about a few more things, take a few more questions, or if we want to end a few minutes early. I don't know what you're feeling.
Yeah, I mean, does anybody else have any other questions?
Let's see. I just got another one about pets' past lives and if we're able to connect with their past lives, like our past lives or future lives.
So the answer is anything is possible. One thing I just want to say is a lot of times we humans put too much emphasis on the past life stuff. Sometimes it's important, and other times it's not. Sometimes we get into it to ask questions. We get into it because we're intrigued. Was my cat something else before or whatever? And but sometimes it's not important. Where it comes up where it's important is if it's important to them for something that they're working on. Usually, like it can come up for matters like fears and phobias, um, behaviors that you can't quite figure out. Sometimes have a past life connection, but it's really not as prevalent. I totally believe in reincarnation, but I can tell you the number of times it comes up regularly in consultations for me is not all that often because it's not usually pertinent to what's going on. So it happens, but people really like really get into that. So it becomes more of a human interest kind of thing than it is constructive. But yes, I mean you can get communications from them about that.
Somebody said that during the exercise, their cat was in the other room and then came to sit with them. That
Oh,
was cool.
thank you. That's really good. I meant to say that. Thank you very much. So, cats in particular love it when you go into a moment of being present. Those of you who meditate, and if you have cats, you've probably experienced this, but you can go into a meditation and suddenly your cats come out of nowhere and they'll just be with you, sitting around you. Cats live in that space. That's what being a cat is that feeling of being totally in the moment. That's what they live in. So when you start getting into that space, they're like, hey, finally the chatter all stopped, the constant chatter in their head just stopped, and they're like here, and they like to celebrate with you, and they'll come right over. I've done this, and Becca can attest to this. We do this exercise, we do the being present exercise with groups here during workshops, and I have had the most amazing animal reactions here on the farm. I never go into one expecting it, but if I'm in the barn doing an exercise, the rooster and his hens have really sometimes they've done it more than once. When the group goes into the being present, they suddenly come running in from wherever they are, and they just stand in the center of the circle, and they just stare at people, and they're like, "Wow." They really got it. They really got it. And then when I bring the people out of the exercise, the rooster will crow and then take his hens away. But it's stunning because he does it. He's done it more than once. And we've had the pigs do it. We've had last, what was it, Becca? Last year was the horses, right? They all came down. Were you at that one?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think it was the horses.
Yeah, the horses all came down out of the pasture and were standing at the gates, which they normally wouldn't do at this particular time of the day. They had just gotten out, but they stood in a semicircle around us. They were just totally intrigued. So animals really are attracted to that when we quiet our chatter.
So interesting. Someone said that chickens like to meditate also
Yes,
with
that's
you.
true. They do. Absolutely.
Okay, we have a few last minute questions that we can sneak in here before we're done. Someone was talking about when their dog was passing away, their cat started chewing the fur off his belly, and they're asking, was that stress? Are they picking up my stress? So I don't know if you could talk for a minute about when an animal's dying and another animal, are they stressed? What do they think about the
Yeah.
situation?
So they can be in my own house when we've had animals dying. There's always a question of do the other animals want to be in the room or not during a
Hmm.
euthanasia or whatever. And we really play it by ear, each individual one, because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. My lab would, we always let them see the body before we take the body away, whether they're there during the euthanasia or not. We do that with the horses too, so that so that they know what happened. We do let them see. Um, so the horses, our horses tend to um, want to be there for their other horse friends. some we have to be careful with that because some of our horses come from really horrific abuse situations and neglect situations where they literally were there watching their friends die one by one. That is not, we don't want to put them into that situation. So we really handle each case by case. So it can be a stress reaction. It can be that the cat was like trying to wake their friend up. I mean, it's impossible for me to say what it is without specifically asking that cat. But when I had one of our dogs passed, it was euthanasia, and I did let my dog Jesse in the room to see the body and everything, and he just went ballistic barking at her, and like he wouldn't stop barking at her. And so when I asked it, I took him out of the room immediately because you could tell he was just really stressed over the top. And afterwards, I said to him, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. What happened? Because I wanted to make sure he understood everything. But I was like, what happened? And he said, she always used to bark at me. And then to have her gone, I didn't know what to do. It was just a reaction. Like he just had a reaction. So they were dogs that didn't get along. Jesse got along, but we had females that didn't get along. So they were in separate parts of our house. So it was odd for them to suddenly go into her space where she was, and to see that she was no longer there. And it created a weird dynamic for them.
Interesting. I think this is the last one on euthanasia, so we'll talk about this quick and then we'll move on. Is it helpful to actually talk to the animal who is dying and also the other animals in the house when you've made the decision, kind of have a conversation with everybody about it?
Yes, especially to the one that's dying. It is definitely, they usually know anyway. I mean, they usually know that because you're so stressed about it, making the decision, they usually get it. But I also tell people this at my workshops all the time. If you're hearing anything in here, like today even, please don't go back and second guess euthanasia decisions you made in the past. Please don't do that to yourself, because in the moment, we all make the best decision we can, and you have to trust that process. But like I said, we humans love to go backward and beat ourselves up over something that happened. So please don't do that after today's lecture. Because you got to trust where you were. You know your animal better than anybody else can, and you need to honor that connection. Because like I said, well-meaning people try to put in their 2 cents and help you get through it or whatever, tell you what they think you should be doing. But when it comes down to it, nobody knows your animal like you do, and you have to trust that connection.
A few people are asking about the animals in the pictures behind you and who they are.
Okay, so there's a horse behind me. It's hard for me to point to him. So this horse here is a horse named Buckwheat, and he was actually the first horse. He was my father's horse when I was a child, so it was the first horse in my life. So that's why his picture is there. I don't know what people can see. There's a white horse jumping, and that's a very famous horse, actually. And he was an Olympic level horse. The Gray Goose, his name is. And Gray was a client of mine. He was in his retirement years. And so he sent me a picture, his person who's riding him sent me a picture of him flying, because after he passed, he wanted to be remembered. He told me he wanted to be remembered as how he flew. So that picture is there. The other horse, there are 2 pictures there. One is a picture of a horse over a fence, and the other one is a picture of a racehorse. It's the same horse. So that horse is Sarava, and Sarava won the Belmont. I can't remember what year it was now, but he won the Belmont. Still to this day, he is the longest long shot in history. And I had been involved with him the day before the Belmont race with his owner and trainer, and it was a film crew from ABC who was doing a pilot show, and they were doing a segment on animal communication, and they had me come out to the Belmont Park because that was the year that War Emblem was supposed to have won the Triple Crown. And this little guy, Sarava, stole that moment from War Emblem. And ABC was trying to get me to talk to War Emblem, which they wouldn't allow me to do. Not ABC, but the owners of, or the trainer of War Emblem. So Sarava's trainer, though, Sarava was a 17-1 long shot, and he ended up winning the race. What always struck me about this was a horse who had a giant heart. He was just a fabulous horse. He won my heart in a heartbeat, but also his trainer and his owners were there, and they wanted what was absolutely best for this horse. And it's rare in the racing industry to find that sort of commitment. Everything was about what was right for him. And it was delightful to be involved with people like that and to be with that. So many years later, he was promised, I told him that if he won, he'd have lots of mares to breed. And he goes, like, right at the end of the race? I was like, no, you're going to be tired at the end of the race. You're not going to want to breed mares. So, but that's where you're going to end up, like this huge breeding career. And that's where he ended up. But he wasn't, his progeny were not very successful. And so his worth as a stud went down. But his owners never let him go. They stayed with him, and they ended up retiring him at a farm in Kentucky. It's a wonderful organization called Old Friends, and they have a lot of, they're a nonprofit organization. They have a lot of ex-race stallions, very famous ones, that live there. As a matter of fact, Sarava was there, and War Emblem ended up being there as well. So it was kind of an interesting situation. But anyway, sadly, Sarava just passed away a couple of years ago. And the game plan was for me to go back out to Old Friends and interview him again to be part of that. And that sadly never happened. And I was devastated when he passed away. But he had a great life, thanks to wonderful people that made sure that he did. It's your atypical racehorse story. So that's why he's behind me. And because it reminds me that no matter what in the world, there's always good in any aspect of something. Not all racing is bad. Not all things are bad. There's always a thread of hope and good out there. And that's why I keep his picture there, because that was his message to me, was about how happy he was being a horse. He loved his athletic body. He loved expressing himself. He loved so many things about his life. He had a great life.
That's so awesome. How about last question? And then I want to share a quick little story that somebody shared as kind of a follow-up from a workshop that I think you'll enjoy.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Last question is about animals that have passed away sending us signs or messages. This person was saying that she felt like she was getting signs and then they stopped. Why does that happen? And then also I'll kind of add this question on, sometimes do our animals just not have anything to say just because?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like humans sometimes do. You could ask me a question on some day and I'll be like, I don't know. I'm fried. I can't answer another question. Absolutely. They don't always have something to say. And sometimes they send signs and sometimes they don't. I don't want people leaving here thinking, well, I never got a sign. That means he's not okay or whatever, because that's what we do. We're always looking for the what's wrong. What did I do wrong? Maybe he didn't love me the way I loved him. And then we go down this terrible road. So don't do that. Some animals do send, and humans, when they pass, send signs back that they're okay. Some of them aren't able to do that only because their energy is depleted. So why would their energy be depleted? Sometimes animals that live to be extremely old, or who have, and people too, or animals or people that died with long illnesses that were really drawn out. Sometimes their energy is depleted when they get back into spirit, and they have to regenerate their energy before they can manipulate physical energy, like to send you a sign. So I was on the phone once with somebody who was going on and on how she had asked her dog for a sign and he didn't give her one, and when he passed, and she was devastated. And she was standing there on the phone with me, and the dog said, oh, for Pete's sake, I've been trying, but you've been missing them. And she said, well, like, I wanted him to send me a bird. Couldn't he have sent me a bird? And she was very specific. She wanted a very, like a bluebird at the feeder or something like that. It was very, very specific. And all of a sudden, as she's talking, she says, she lets out this shriek. And I said, what's the matter? And she said, Dawn, there's a feather that's falling down from my second floor down the staircase. And it's just swirling through the air and it's coming down and it just landed in front of me. She said, I'm not making this up. And the woman was frantic. She was like, I don't have anything in this house where this feather could have come from. Could it be from him? And I'm like, do you have to ask me that question? I mean, do you have to ask for confirmation to that question? You know, that was amazing. That doesn't usually happen that way on demand. But the reason why it may stop is they may be doing other things. They also do other things in spirit. So sometimes their energy is more fragmented because they're doing one thing, they're still responding to you. And the other thing is sometimes they're just sending messages until they know you've gotten it. And if they know you've gotten it, then they stop trying to send it to you. So that's also a possibility.
That makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna read this last little cool story and then we'll wrap up. So this is from Deborah, and I'm just gonna read it exactly what she said. So Deborah says, when I was at Spring Farm Cares for a workshop, I spoke to you, Dawn, about my rescue golden who was asking me for a cat. You said that she was and asked me what she wanted to name her. And I said, Charisse. Charisse. I took my dog to look at cats, and I remember seeing a black cat at this one store, and I thought about getting her, but I didn't. Then going to your workshop, I knew I needed to get her a cat. So I went to the store, and the same cat was there, and my dog chose that cat. I adopted her and she came home and they were the best of friends. They played together all the time. When Charisse got accidentally outside, I would tell Bailey, my dog, where's your kitty? And she would run outside and, you know, get her back in the house, telling her that mom doesn't want her to go outside. And then she said, after that, Bailey told me that she was a cat in a previous life and Charisse was a dog. And they made a promise that when they died, they would come back as the opposite and be together.
Wow. Cool.
So that's so cool.
Thank you very much for sharing that. But those are the kind of messages that you can get when you're listening. Absolutely. That's neat.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deborah. And you know, if there's other questions you have, especially about animal communication, I would highly recommend looking at our YouTube channel, which is just Spring Farm Cares on YouTube. We just Dawn just did a talk a month ago about animal communication that's up there. There's a lot of great videos that you can learn more. So what I'm going to do to wrap up is just go over a few things and then we'll call it a day.
Okay.
Okay. So like I said before, the replay will be sent later today if you want to share it with a friend or if you want to watch it again. I'm going to put 2 links in the chat right now. One is that donation link again, if you feel so inclined to make a donation, if you enjoyed this today. And the second is to our workshop page. I'm going to actually share a little graphic right now with some information about a 2-day workshop that Dawn is teaching here in person at Spring Farm Cares in the summer/fall. There's 2 of them. If you liked this, you'll really love this workshop. So we're going to just talk about this for a minute and then we'll call it a day. So the Embracing Spirit workshop, this is sort of a little intro to it, but if you want to dive deeper into all these topics, we have one in July and then one in October. It's 2 days. It's here live at the farm. I don't know if you want to talk say more details about it, Dawn.
I just want to say that a lot of people think, oh, geez, I don't want to spend 2 days in a workshop on death and dying, and I'm being coached from this end on not calling it a workshop on death and dying, but it is a workshop that deals with death and dying. But it's a very uplifting workshop, and I don't know if there's anybody on this call right now that has taken it that wants to put something in the chat, but people tend to get a lot of, it's very uplifting rather than sad. It's not a sad workshop at all. It's a workshop about hope and about living, because we fear death so much that we don't live life to the fullest. And that is why I teach the workshop. That's what the animals have asked me to do, what they asked me to share. So, and I talk about that um, in the uh, in the workshop itself as to why I started teaching this workshop. It really was because of a llama named Gulliver who really got on my case about this is what he wanted me to do. So it's my legacy to Gulliver, um, and because you don't realize how much your life gets interrupted by fear of death and dying.
Mm. Yeah, there's a few people that have done the workshops and have loved it in the chat, and I can attest it's so much fun. There's definitely more tears for me at the animal communication
Yes.
one. Lots of laughter at this workshop from
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
experience. It was really fun.
Yeah. It is. It is a fun workshop. Not that the animal communication one isn't fun, but people do. It's funny because people don't want to attend this one because they're afraid of crying for 2 days. But it's actually the other one that they cry more. I don't know why, but it just works that way.
So if you're interested in coming, again, that link I just put in the chat, you'll have to scroll up a little bit, but you'll also get the link in the email that we send later. And if you have any questions, you can email us, you can call us, but we'd love to see you here. And I think that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and practice your being present. You don't need me reading through something to do that. You could just breathe through your heart. The reason why thinking of an animal you love works is because it automatically puts you in your heart. And if you stay present from there, breathing in and out from that space, you will become, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the better you get at it, and you'll start to receive communications. You'll start to be aware of things through there. So thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you guys. Have a good weekend.